Hello, hello. Welcome to the Betaport stage. Betaport is the first sustainable mobility hub on demand. And during the last 2 hours, we hosted a really exciting session about the futures of new planning, post-pandemic planning. Together with 25 experts of the fields and, oh, it's so hot here, architecture, design, planning, innovation and tech. And my name is Manuel Funk. I'm co-founder of Novo Applied Futures. We are a future consultancy and we developed a framework called future modeling. And based on this method, we had workshops on 4 clusters, and each cluster was hosted by a future pilot. The first pilot is Anke Parson from Betaport, and she's introducing us to her insights.
Thanks, Manuel. Yes, so we spoke today on the future of circular business models and what is really needed to become circular in all business models. So we started from the point that it's actually about that we shouldn't damage our planet anymore. So how can we do this? We should firstly think, what is already there? Do we really have to produce it new? Can we recycle it? But furthermore, we also have in our society really start to rethink how we use things. Do we really have to buy it? Or is it not even better that we just use it and we develop just a service for everything? So I don't have to own my own washing machine anymore. I just get my shirts somewhere washed. And in doing this, we are breaking the capitalistic approach and we can start to rethink our business models. And to do so, we also spoke about what kind of legal frameworks are needed to have this future approach. How can we have companies being really responsible for what they produce? Can we maybe force them to take everything back what they produce? Like in the car industry, they just produce cars for 2-3 years, but then what happens with the cars afterwards? Can we make them take the cars back? Like we already starting in architecture when we think about material banks, where, for example, Schüco is taking back their facades and then redealing with their material. And to do this, it's really important to have structures which we can easily disassemble and put it back in their raw materials, like we also do it in the Betaport. And when we have this ready, then it's time for the new business models. So we don't actually pay for the material anymore. We just think how we can have a business model in using certain materials. And if this is completed, then we are ready for the architecture for post-growth with flexible constructions and also flexible installations. Thank you.
Great, Anke. Stay here, stay here. Thank you. What is your impression? What is your impression talking about post-pandemic planning? Did this crisis spark a new mindset of circular economy?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we for example, we had a whole year digital office. We didn't even went to an office anymore. I thought this will have such a major change on city development and also on architecture and how we will live and work in the future and use spaces in the future. Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Then the next future pilot, or the next future pilots are Frank Steffens and Jan Wenker from Bruninghof. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, our theme is the future of hybrid buildings. We have a very interesting talk in each group. First of all, what is the typical of hybrid buildings? First of all, because it's not so famous like we think it's famous enough to know what is there behind. So we talk. One talking theme is material, and the future of hybrid buildings for the next maybe 10 years or maybe also 5 years is the point of reusable components, the material point especially, talking about material as a service maybe, or in this planning process, material, the information about material in these big data material passports, there can be, I think, right solutions, and also not only solutions for the future in 10 years. It's actually there, but there are not so many customers who want this kind of information on the first thing, or who are able to work with this kind of information. Because for most of them, it makes no sense to have it, to know it. I think that will be a change for the next months, for the next years. And I think that was one big thing. And the other thing was, we found out in the groups was the wish about flexibility in the configuration of rooms, like this year, for example. Also for other kind of buildings, using in the industry, using as a production hall, using as an office or residential building. So it's different kind of using buildings. So this the way of becoming more flexibility in the configuration and this kind of automatically configuration. I think that was one big wish in most of the groups. Jan.
Thank you very much. So we had some more points worked out in our session. First of all, thank you for our participants for contribution. And besides the construction and the building as itself, energy harvesting was a big point. Energy harvesting at the roof, at the facade, so that the building produces even more energy than it consumes. So this is one more key point for sustainability, and whatever we do in future, we have to foster the climate change mitigation. So that's a very crucial point. So we have to think about it all the time. And to do so, we have to have some kind of user participation. Perhaps you can call it DIY or so on, but user participation and user-centered buildings is a very crucial point, because we have got architects, we have got engineers, we have got building companies, but who is the person who uses the building? So that's a key factor to have user participation within hybrid buildings and buildings in general. So we shouldn't forget this with all the discussions. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your insights. During this short time travel into the future of 2035, what was the most interesting insight you learned today? Because you're obviously experts in hybrid buildings. Did you learn something new?
Well, not completely new, but it set a spotlight on the disassembly, design for disassembly, reuse, material passport thing, building as material banks. That is a spotlight we worked out in the sessions.
So for me, not really new, but newer than the other points, is really the question for the next time: who is the owner? The owner of material. Okay. That's the question. And I think that's, I think for me today, a really new perspective for the next weeks and months and years, to discuss this with customers, planners, and also to discuss it with in our teams and with other teams, just what we can do and realize in our prefabrication process, and also in process of how we should develop buildings and what kind of new people we need for this kind of discussion to create not only new designs, just to create new targets for it.
Great, thank you, Jan. Thank you, Frank. We continue our conversation in a few minutes, but in the meanwhile, we welcome Willem Demmers and Lance Holman from Trilux and Check Be Nimble, and we are really keen to learn what you experience in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, we'll start by thanking all the participants. I think a session like this can only work when everyone contributes, and that's what everyone did. It's said that the difference between information and knowledge is structure. So what Willem and I attempted to do was add some structure to all the great information that we got and harvested in our sessions. We really came down, as you can see, a ton of information here. We really came down to 3 key takeaways, which we focused on. And the first of those had to do with people.
Yes, it's interesting because maybe it's something everyone thinks is logical, but it seems to be not logical, is that we first have to listen to the people, listen to the user of the building, and based on what the user of the building wants that we create the building, and that's interesting. Another interesting view was from somebody who's really not into building buildings, but more in using buildings and more creative, was you have to feel like a butterfly in the building. And I felt that it was a very nice description how you want to be. You want to feel free, you want to feel welcome in a building. That was one of the key things. But also, if you look at people, it's about trust. In the planning process of a building, you need to trust your partners in creating this building, because sometimes end of the process you want to change something because there's new technology. And then you have to trust your partners. It was also one of the things which came across.
So there were some general ideas, but there were also very specific ideas. So someone suggested we have an individual firefly. Imagine in 2035 you walk around and instead of having lights mounted to the ceiling, you have a light that follows around with you, that you can automatically turn on and off as you would like your lighting scene to be. And when you leave the building, it travels with you. When you enter your car, when you go home, a personalized light. So you can see that we had very forward-thinking people in our sessions, not only coming up with general ideas like trusting each other or about interaction, about making sure that people from different disciplines come together, but also some very concrete product ideas. In contrast, the second key theme that we took away was to come away from product and come into solutions.
Yeah, so that's where we said you first have to, one of the items was you first have to understand the problem before you can work on the solution. Also, I think very familiar for everyone, because the solution should not follow create a problem in the end. So that was interesting. So from solution to the user was one of the key things. We have to think of the guy who's the journey of the person who's using the building. And what is also the case is that sometimes we need to take more time for reflection during the building, the creation process of the building. Time for reflection to say, are we really on the right way? We have to look in the mirror, is this really a sustainable solution? And maybe that can lead to a delay in the planning process, but we have to keep in our minds the solution in the end for the customer.
It was refreshing to hear how many voices were speaking up and saying we need to take that little step of courage. We need to have the courage to slow down the planning process. So despite everything rushing, despite everything jumping in, despite deadlines, despite rushing, despite everything else, the idea was, how can we slow down? How can we reflect? How can we come up with a better idea if we take a bit more time to do that? So that was a key lesson for us as well, is to focus on the solutions rather than on the products. The third idea that we came into, and I think it might have been inspired by the other sessions, was about materials. A lot of people came talking about materials and said, what can we do to optimize materials in the future?
Yeah, and I think the most nice thing I heard during the session was maybe the building in the end of the day is a temporary warehouse of raw materials. So if we keep that in mind, the design of the products, the design of the building is based on it should have a second life. And I think that also came across in the presentation we just heard from the other group.
So people, solutions, and materials. Thank you so much for the input, and looking forward to the rest of the festival.
Thank you for your summary. I really love the butterfly in the building picture. You mentioned trust. How do you build trust in such a complex planning process?
Well, that's really difficult, because if you want to build trust, you need to allow people to make mistakes. And that is a culture which has to change.
Are you already there, or what is your long-term vision to do that?
No, we have some experience in that, but I think in the end of the day, the whole chain should work together. And that's the builder, it's the designer, it's the guy who designs the products in the end of the day, and also the user of the building. They all have to work together and trust each other.
Great.
And allow to make mistakes.
Thank you, Willem. Thank you, Lance. The founders of the slow planning movement. And now, last but not least, we welcome Gonzalo Portabella from Morean. And you explored the futures of AI-supported planning.
Exactly. Thank you very much to all the nice input that has been appearing during the session. First of all, what struck me the first is that the distribution, the even distribution among all these stones. One would think that AI would automatically fill the technologic part, but in general, there was a very nice distribution of interest. I would group this input in different groups. Like one, and very related to what you just said, is related to trust. How can we be sure that the solution this AI is producing can be trusted on one hand? So how can we generate this trust, like with the idea of doing some cases where the thing gets bigger and bigger so we can learn to trust, as you said? And also, in case things doesn't work, who's responsible for that? So is the AI, is the programmer, something? Then the other point, very interesting, was about data. So the AI needs to be very, very well informed. And people can generate their data, but it needs to be somehow connected. So this could lead to to some entities appearing and connecting all this data. So it can be optimized and used live in certain situations. One of which, also very interesting, is not, we all think about planning finished buildings, but there is this component of live planning, like if there is a catastrophe, which resources are interested for this kind of catastrophe, where they are, how can they be improved. In this sense, the planning through artificial intelligence can optimize this. Obviously, the topic at the beginning was about planning and like for the client, but also certainly AI has the power of helping the process of planning. Can from automating the distribution of drawings in the plan to suggest solutions for the designers. And one thing before the last topic, it was very interesting to see that there was no strong reaction from planners, like saying, okay, no, this is going to take my job. It was more rather like, how can we put our ideas into this artificial intelligence? And that's very interesting because it shows the aim of really collaborating. But to me, the very, very interesting point was when people started to talk about emotion. And particularly, and because we are all like thinking about optimizing, reducing waste and so on, is about this fight between qualitative versus quantitative. Also related when you were discussing about the building, like what if the AI is also seeing how people are using the building and reacting to that? What is if the AI, when you are designing, doesn't check right from the beginning if your solution is correct, but modifies itself and lets you see where you want to arrive. So these are all inputs and probably future-oriented in the sense that this is not happening at the moment. So it's a very, very initial. I mean, it's happening in its more rudimentary, automatic implementations, but definitely this kind of, first of all, regulation on one side, coordination of data, and then like the development of these emotions inside the AI are the steps that we need to take in order to use this tool in a correct way.
Thank you, Gonzalo. One question, talking about the future job of a planner. Obviously, this will change a lot because we need more collaboration between machines and planners. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the main skill, the main future skill of a planner in 10, 15 years?
Well, I think planners really need to learn their craft. So that's the skill they need. What AI needs to do is to be easy enough to be used. And then one could imagine like the implementation in a way that there is this kind of set of universal rules that would define what a good illumination of a building is, construction and so on. But then the planner should be the ones that specifically for a project would design these rules. So the skill that they need to learn is their craft and their intuition. Because in theory, if the system is well developed, it's going to be, I mean, you would be needed only to say a few sentences of what you want or your criteria. You don't need to learn programming or all this stuff. That's what I think.
Great, thank you. I now invite all speakers again on the stage, and we have some last questions to talk about and a few minutes left. First question to all of you. Was this your first time travel into the future? Have you ever traveled to the future before?
Yes. Well, I think we all live in the future, and a bit in the past, and a bit in the present. So,
Okay. But I mean, as a company leader, are you doing time traveling and strategic foresight processes as a daily business, or is this?
I think it's one of the punishments of being a team leader is that you're always thinking about the future. You allow others the luxury of living in the present.
Yeah, great.
So for me, it was not the first time, for sure. I can tell you that our customers are demanding us to think in the future, and that's the nice thing of our work. So that keeps us sharp.
Yeah, for me it was also not the first time, but I think it's always important to sometimes switch your mind and really think you are 20 years ahead and what is there, what did you wanted to achieve, because then starting to replan certain topics in your work field is the one where you start changing your own behavior.
Absolutely. Gonzalo, what about you?
Well, we obviously think always about what are the next steps, but honestly, it's the first time we do this exercise with people from so many different disciplines. And I think that is very, very enriching because it's not you looking either or what's the next thing or in your office. It's more seeing different opinions and maybe different degrees of knowledge. So in this sense, for our work, we design content or tools to help people communicate. So we don't create, let's say, products. And in this sense, it's very interesting to learn what people need to communicate. And yeah, it was a very nice exercise.
Absolutely. Jan and Frank, do you have a long-term vision for Brünninghof?
Yes, of course we have, and we are thinking about the future on different levels. First of all, we are thinking about company transformation process that we are thinking in the midterm, where we want to stand with our company in 2025 or 2030, so in the midterm vision. And on the product level, it's my daily business to think about the future as a project manager for research, development and innovation. We are always thinking which products we want to produce in, let's say, 2, 3 or 4 years and develop them to bring them to the market in the short to midterm. So it's our daily business.
Excellent. We think, obviously, that this is a major thing to do, thinking long-term about strategies in the future and also shaping them actively. And I'm really grateful that you all jumped into this brave concept of time traveling today. Last question, especially interesting for Anke in the middle of our group. What do you think about the Betaport concept? Is this a forward-thinking, future-proof concept? What inspires you standing in the middle of this prototype?
Maybe I can start. I think there are many components in this Betaport that inspired our groups and also us. There are many, many points on our future for hybrid buildings that are very similar to the ideas in this Betaport project. So it's reusable, it's flexible, it's architecture on demand. So there are, I think in this kind of project, there are many, many wishes of customers or future customers inside. And I think that's a good, not only an idea, it's a good future to know how we can, which kind of concepts we will have maybe next year, maybe in 2023-24, but I think it's it's not only future. It's the future for this is not so far anymore, and I think that makes it easier to be how should I say it in English? So what we can what we can achieve for of our targets we will have. So it's just easier to know what will happen in the next weeks and next months and next years.
This is a good example of forward-thinking concepts, right? What is your opinion?
The result is, without a question, astounding. That it came together this quickly and that we can all stand here today and have this fantastic event is the proof is in the pudding. But when we reflected internally about why we thought this was such a great endeavor, it had nothing to do with this building, with this lighting concept, with the fact that we're all staying here. It was actually the process that led to it. And Sophia told me, despite moments of frustration and confusion and chaos, that it was actually the other C word, the collaboration, that stood in the middle point. This is the reason why we do planning. It's not to open the drawer and rehash something that we've done 10 times before. So if there's any aspect of looking into the future that's beneficial, I think that it forces people who wouldn't normally talk to each other to come together in a short period of time to come up with a result.
Great, thank you. Anke, you want to respond to something?
Yeah, I can just say a big thank you to all partners we had on board, but because without all our partners, this whole port would not be here. And it's also a big thank you to the GREENTECH, who actually gave us also to push in January to actually produce this port. And I think for us, it's just the starting point. We had super interesting discussions today about the business models of the future, how we can collaborate, how we can trust. And I think this is what we have to build on now together for the future of Betaport.
And the future of the planet and the future of planning. Thank you for joining and participating. Thank you for watching and listening, and have a good evening. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.